I remember looking around at people again. They started to just kind of like not feel real to me. And that immediately made me freak out. I was just, flipping out because I'm in a big warehouse. There's a lot of noises going off and stuff. And I'm seeing all these people and they don't like feel real to me. I feel disconnected from them. I would look around at my wall and stuff and just kind of look around, and it felt like the entire like dimensions and everything in my room had just been flipped or something. It just seemed like my room was smaller than usual or bigger than usual or just whatever. It didn't feel like my room, almost like I had died that night with the edibles and stuff. And it's like I woke up after I woke up that next day, it's like I was in a different reality or a different dimension or whatever. That thought kind of kept going to my head, and I was like, I knew it was like ridiculous to think, but at the same time, it felt so real that that could have been a possibility at this point. It's funny because literally just a few months ago, I was in the position of watching these interviews, going through this condition, saying it's over for me. I'm never gonna, get through it. And now I'm on the channel telling people you will get through it.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Wylden Cox from Atlanta, Georgia. Wylden is 21 years old. Last year he developed Depersonalization Derealization Disorder after a bad experience with weed edibles. His symptoms included feeling out of his body and a constant sense of disconnection from the people and loved ones around him. Wylden suffered with the condition and these symptoms for about 6 months. But fortunately, Wylden has since made a complete recovery. As he wrote to me in a recent email, quote, I went through the terrible feelings of depersonalization and derealization for months on end until thankfully I found your videos and the DP manual. I would love to do an interview with you because I really want to share my story and try to help the people that go through this terrible condition. End quote. And Wylden is with us today to talk about his experience with and recovery from depersonalization, derealization disorder. Wylden, you're very welcome to the channel. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Great to have you on the channel, man. Wylden, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name's Wylden. I'm 21, born and raised in Atlanta. Growing up, I was always really big into sports and staying active and stuff. And I also do music for a living. So actually released my first song next week. So I'm really excited. I just got out of the studio. But yeah, that's pretty much a little bit about me.
That's great, man. That's very exciting. What kind of music do you do?
Really everything. I grew up with all different types of music and stuff. Mainly like this project that I ended up doing was more of a kind of like a punk, like I guess rock type of sound. But I grew up loving all types. I really want to create everything. So kind of that type of thing.
That's great. Well, listen, when the song comes out, send me over the link and we'll add it to the
Oh yeah.
video description here. So everyone watching, go and check out Wylden's music. I'm very excited to hear that myself. Are you in college or working at the moment, Wylden?
Oh yeah, I currently work warehouse. I'm doing the graveyard shift right now. So trying to get on something morning so I can have a regular set schedule, but I have been on part-time lately, so I've had time to do my music and do other stuff. So
That's great, man. Good to hear. Good to hear. So Wylden, can you tell us a bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
yeah, so this was on February 21st last year. So it's been basically a year and a month. But I ended up this was right after a work shift, actually. I think it was like a Wednesday night, I believe Tuesday or Wednesday night. I'd gotten in, and at the time my roommate lives with me and my brother. And anyways, I had these weed edibles and stuff. And it had been a while like prior to this that I had done any like type of like cannabis or anything. I kind of took a break from it. from a while and stuff, and I never really had any bad experiences that much beforehand. There was a few times where I've had like a little bit of like panic and stuff like that at times when I did do weed, but it wasn't, anything super bad. But I ended up taking these edibles, and the crazy thing is I really didn't even take that much too. I probably took like um one and a half, which I know different edibles have like different like some of them are way more potent than others. So, but about a half an hour goes by, and I remember first thing I really noticed was the cotton mouth, which I know is normal with weed and edibles and all that stuff. But I noticed it was just way worse than I've really ever had. It was kind of strange, and I ended up like drinking water and stuff. Drink a good bit actually, and it was crazy. Like as soon as I finished drinking my water, it's just my mouth would just be sandpaper immediately after drinking. I was like, all right. I was like, that's a little weird. And I was laying down on my bed actually, and then uh next thing I knew, I kind of felt started feeling a little panicky, which again that's happened before with it, so I didn't think much of it. Kind of just um let it go past my head a little bit, and I actually ended up because my roommate stayed in my living room, so I ended up going in there and talking to him for a few minutes, just trying to get like my mind off of it, I guess. And we were just talking about stuff. Then the next thing I know, I got this huge aura of like just lightheadedness, and I felt like my brain was like basically being hijacked. So um it was the craziest feeling I've ever had. And I immediately kind of I didn't really collapse necessarily, but I kind of just fell to the ground because I was like, I don't know what is going on exactly. I originally thought I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke or something, which I know was a really common thing in your videos that people would say and stuff. But yeah, that was my initial first instinct. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm having a heart attack or I'm having a stroke or just some type of medical emergency. But I remember I was laying on the floor flat. He ended up calling my brother in and stuff, and I was kind of just I was kind of just laying there. I couldn't really move or think or process. Like my brain had just like kind of just shut off. It was really strange. And yeah, so they ended up actually dialing 911 originally. So they had 911 on the phone and all that stuff. It's crazy thinking about like back on it now, but um something to do with the operator or whatever. They were taking too long or just were being stupid. Something like that. So my brother ended up actually just saying, all right, screw it. We're just gonna like take you to the hospital basically. So um I'm like 6'4", so not to flex my height or anything, but like I'm a pretty big guy. So my brother ended up literally like cradling me in his arms and like carrying me out of the house basically. So um very funny, but ended up throwing me in the car. I remember on my way there, my first of all, my vision was super distorted. Um, what else? It was kind of like framey, very weird vision. Um, I remember also uh it was crazy when we'd get to like a stoplight or something or a stop sign or like the parking lot or anything. When we were stopped, I remember feeling like I was in a boat or something like on water. Like it felt like the car was like waving. It was really weird. And finally got to the hospital and we kind of just sat in the parking lot for a little bit because we didn't really want to go in unless I like knew that something was completely wrong. So we kind of just sat there for a little bit, and eventually it was probably about 15-20 minutes. I finally started, I mean, I still felt terrible, but I started to feel that I wasn't dying. So that immediately made me feel a little bit better. But oh, something I forgot to mention also was during that moment, all that water that I drank and stuff, I really had to use a bathroom at this time, and there was a Walmart literally right across the street from the hospital. So we ended up going over there, and my roommate ended up grabbing me one of those like electric cart things for me to ride, and I was completely disoriented and everything. So I'm over here in the middle of Walmart riding the electric cart with my eyes half open. Yeah, and he's like trying to like steer me and direct me to the right way and everything to the bathroom. And finally, I get to the bathroom. I use the bathroom, and like midway through, I'm trying not to pass out. I'm like, I need to just hurry up and get back to the chair. So finally got out of there, got back to the little cart thing that I was riding. And I also remember vividly, it's crazy I remember most of this too, because I thought I would have forgotten a lot of it, but I do remember a good bit. It's all kind of a blur, but I remember also being in there. I felt like every single person in the entire store was like watching me, which was super crazy to think about. I don't know, it was the weirdest thing. It felt like legit. I don't know if you ever seen like the movie Get Out or anything, but it kind of felt like that. It's like as soon as I turned away from anybody or anything, I felt like they were all just locked in on me and staring at me. So it's super big like paranoia
Mm.
and stuff. But yeah, finally, oh this was all happening at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning too, by the way. So because it was right after I got off work. But yeah, that happened. We finally ended up going back home because I was like, I think I'm good. I'm just gonna try to sleep it off. So finally got back home and fell asleep for a little bit. So but yeah.
Okay. And and did you actually get some sleep?
Yeah, I did I slept pretty much till the next day. I ended up calling off work because I didn't explain like the whole edible thing, but I explained everything else. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. It's such a common experience um smoke weed or take an edible and find that it is stronger than you anticipated.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and just think especially with edibles as well, they can they can kind of creep up on you. Um,
Yeah.
it can be hard to, they just kind of it keeps ramping up, and you're like, how much longer is this going to keep going? Like,
Yeah.
because I feel
Yeah.
quite high now, but it's
Yo.
still it's still going up and up and up. Like, and it's like, how much can my body take? How much can my mind take? And you start to,
Yeah.
oh, what if I've taken too much? And the spiral of panic.
Yeah.
Off it goes. Then yeah, it's a very very frightening experience for sure. Um, uh, and had your brother taken something as well?
No, it was only me because like I said, I had just gotten off work and stuff, and I kind of just wanted something to just like relax to, I guess. It had been a while, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna and then do my thing. Apparently, also, which I thought was crazy, is my brother doesn't really get like high like that. He kind of has like I know there's certain people who can take edibles and stuff. They don't really feel the effects of weed. He's one of those people. So
Mm, right,
yeah.
right. Okay. Um, so you got some sleep and you took the day off work, and so you woke up the next day,
Yeah.
and what was that like?
Um, I immediately noticed something felt off. I couldn't really tell because with my depersonalization and derealization was uh which I know is common. It came on kind of slow. It didn't happen immediately. Um, but I remember the next day I woke up, called off work because I was like, there's no way I'm going into work that day. I was just kind of like mentally exhausted. Um, so called out that day, and I kind of just stayed at the house all day and just kind of relaxed. But I did notice that I had a weird feeling. I couldn't put my finger on it right then and there, but it kind of felt pretty much just like I was still like high to a certain extent, even though this was, you know, a good 15 hours probably after uh, everything had happened. So I was like, I actually was talking to my roommate at the time about it. I was like, dude, I was like, is it weird that I still feel kind of high? And he was like, no, maybe because that stuff um stays in your system and stuff for a while. And I was like, I don't really think much of it. So um that ended up happening. And I remember that night I went back to sleep. I didn't sleep that long, but I did get a little bit of sleep, and I'd be going to work the next day because I was like, I already called off one day. I'm not gonna miss another day. And not at all did I want to go. I still felt this was basically like a day and a half later. I still felt kind of high and just weird. And I was like, there's no way I'm still feeling the effects of these edibles literally, almost 2 days later. But one weird thing that happened right off the bat was I remember driving to work about 2 days later after this happened. And I remember when I was driving, it was again, it's hard to explain to someone who's never gone through it before, like us. But kind of just felt like almost like someone else was driving for me. Like I was driving, but I kind of acknowledged that I was driving. It's the weirdest thing. It's like my brain was just doing it for me, and I was just kind of like in my own mind. It was really weird. And the next thing I know, in that work, I'm like, how did I even get here? Type of stuff. But I remember the shift started. I went in. I remember right off the bat again, and this moment was pretty much just as scary, if not more scary than the night that the edibles and stuff happened. I got to work and work in a big warehouse, so there's a lot of noise, a lot of stuff happening, a big open space and stuff. So it's like your biggest nightmare when you're going through DPDR. So um but I remember probably about like 15 minutes into my shift, um I noticed I started getting floaters, which you've mentioned a lot in your manual and stuff. Um and they were all in my peripheral. It was really weird. And then as soon as I would see them and I'd look over at them, they'd disappear. It was the strangest thing. And at first, when it was first happening, it was kind of I mean, I definitely noticed, but it wasn't like a huge problem. It was just kind of like lingering there, and it was messing with me a little bit. But I was like, I'm just gonna ignore this and trying to work. So, but then as time went on by, it started getting worse and worse and worse, and it got to where basically almost my entire peripheral, besides what I was staring at, was just dancing. And I was like, I immediately just freaked out. I was like, I kind of held, I'd never had that happen before, or anything. And immediately I was just flipping out. And so I actually ended up going to the little, like, there's like this little restroom, like slash bathroom type of thing, uh right where I was, thank God, because I need somewhere to just kind of like lay down or just something like that. So I ended up laying down in there, and I told my coworker, because my coworker's right there. I was like, you need to like grab a manager or something because I'm just like, I don't know what's happening. And right then and there again, I figured, oh my gosh, like I'm having a stroke, or uh I got some like tumor in my head or something that's causing my vision to go crazy, and all this stuff. It was just terrifying. And my managers ended up walking in, and they see me laying on the floor, and I'm just like, what's up? And they're immediately flipping out. They didn't know what happened. They thought I probably like fell or fainted or something, or collapsed, whatever. But I kind of explained to them. Oh, I wanted to mention something prior to this too, is I do have which there was a girl that you interviewed too. I think she's like the same age as me. She also had POTS, but I have POTS, which is like the heart condition, which is crazy to think about too, because I was watching that and I was like, wow, I was like, not only does someone else have like my condition, but they're the same age as me, and they've also gone through like DPDR, and it made me feel like so much less alone. But yeah, I've had that since about probably about like mid eighth grade. So yeah, that definitely doesn't help in those type of situations also. But throughout that shift, that ended up happening and everything. They ended up sending me home. So after I'd kind of calmed down, once I laid down and kind of just took some deep breaths and everything, the floaters and stuff tried to they basically disappeared for the most part. But I was just feeling super uneasy after that. So um I ended up calling my roommate, my best friend at the time, to just basically just pick me up, and basically he pretty much knew already what was going on. So yeah, that was pretty much 2 days prior to everything happening after that.
Okay. And what did you think was happening at that point? What
Um,
because you mentioned as worrying it was a stroke or something,
yeah,
but I mean, I remember when I was at that stage after I'd had my bad weed experience, um, I I thought I had damaged my brain with the drug, maybe, or it
that's
had,
exactly how I felt.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was that was one of my first things. I thought that I had done. It freaked me out because I immediately thought that I had done some irreversible damage to my brain. So it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna be stuck like this forever. I just completely, ruined my whole buildup of my brain and everything. It was just that's immediately what I thought. And the first thing that I started doing basically um at this time, about 2 or 3 days later after it happened, was I knew something was definitely off. I couldn't tell what it was right off, but I eventually started researching because I was like, this is not normal to feel, high and stuff, pretty much 3 4 days later after you've taken some edibles and things. So I immediately came across some stuff on like Reddit and some other things at the internet, but there's other people who were going through the same stuff. At this time, I didn't know it was called um, depersonalization, derealization, but I'd seen things where people were saying like, yeah, I took weed edibles or blah blah blah, this some type of drug or just whatever, and they would still feel like the effects and just felt weird even like weeks later. And I was reading this, I was like, and someone in particular said about like 2 weeks or something they felt like weird after they took these edibles or like whatever. I was like, okay. So I was like, that's a little strange, but I was like, and if it's 2 weeks, that's gonna suck. But if that means, after 2 weeks this is gone, then whatever. So um 2 weeks ended up going by and did definitely not leave. So um ended up getting back on my computer and stuff because I'm a big researcher. So anytime I want to like read about something or just discover something, especially with my body, because I pretty much self-diagnosed myself with POTS originally before the doctor actually confirmed my diagnosis. So um but yeah, I get super into researching and stuff when something with my body's going on. Kind of like the health anxiety type of stuff. I get that a lot. I just kind of can't help it. But yeah, went back on the internet again and started searching more about this strange condition that I was apparently going through. And I I'd never heard of it. I never really seen much things about it. Um but then I went back on Reddit again and did some more research and just was clicking on more people's stories and just trying to find out how common this really was. And then I started getting to the dark side of stuff, which was like, I've been going through this for 10 plus years now and blah 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 and just all this stuff. And I was like, there is no way that I can go through this for a decade. I was like, there's no way, no way. And it's just I was just reading all these stories that were similar to that, and it completely freaked me out. I was like, there's gotta be some type of way I could stop feeling like this. And it was so frustrating at the time too, because all these people that were saying all these stories and going through this condition, nobody had like a true um way of getting out of it. Like nobody really was explaining exactly that you do this and you do that and you'll be out of it, or just anything like that. It was always just the stories and saying, I don't know how to get out of this and all this, and it just completely tore me apart at the time. So
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And the the, the really interesting thing is that like so DPDR is an anxiety-based condition. Anxiety-based conditions are harmless and temporary, and there are ways and means to get out of them. People fit these conditions and recover from them every day of the week. 1 in 3 people will develop an anxiety-based condition at some point in their lives.
yeah,
1 in 50 people will develop depersonalization, which is an anxiety-based condition at some point in their lives. Um, all the information to recover is out there, but because the research that we do initially, or the Googling that we do initially, tends to bring us to forums,
yeah,
what we see is not an accurate representation of the collected information to recover. What you're seeing are the experiences of people who are going through it in that moment,
yeah,
and people who, just like I did, get into the habit of like venting about your symptoms, constantly comparing and contrasting them, doing that every day, and then wondering why the symptoms aren't going away.
yeah,
And it's like, and I mean, no judgment, because I was that person for 2 years. I did
yeah,
exactly that for 2 years. I was on there was only one forum back in the day, but I was on it every day. I had friends there, like, and I did those with the best of intentions, um, but what that leads to is that people develop the condition, and then they almost inevitably end up on some forum where you're just seeing a list of often people just going through the same thing you're going through, saying, this is the worst thing ever. I can't recover. Here's this person who had it for 5 years. Here's this person who had it for 10 years.
yeah,
And it is like the worst possible thing that you could see as somebody who's just started to go
yeah.
through it. Man, I was the same. I saw as people there saying, I've had this for 20 years. And I was just going like, I've had this for
Oh, yeah.
I've had this for like 3 weeks, and I'm done. Like,
That's exactly how I was.
yeah, I can't do another like 3 hours with this, not to mind like 15, 20 years. Like,
Yeah,
it's, yeah. But fortunately, it's not an accurate representation of the information that is out there to get you out of this, just like there are for all anxiety-based conditions. But I know what you
yeah,
mean. It's a scary thing to go through.
yeah.
You mentioned a few of them, Wylden, but could you tell us a bit more in some more detail about the symptoms you were experiencing at this time?
Yeah. So, right off the bat again, every day my vision was just was weird. It kind of felt like I couldn't really fully, well, basically like I couldn't really fully focus on anything, which was super frustrating because my brain had just been in fight or flight mode 24/7. So when I wanted to do any hobby or just anything, it didn't feel like I was doing it. It kind of just felt like my conscious had just kind of like shut off, and all, like, my subconscious was just doing it. I basically just felt like a robot. So it was really really strange. I got a lot of small mini like panic attacks throughout the day, which I've had that in the past because again with my heart condition and stuff like that, I've had like some high anxiety things um throughout my life, so I'm kind of familiar with that. But this was like on a different level. This was had immediately increased it to like at least like 2 or 3 times a day. Probably every single day I'd have panic attacks. And I remember even because I was still working at this time, trying to just push through it because I knew that that was probably one of the best options that helped me get through this type of stuff was, staying active and keeping my mind active and everything. Um, but I remember one particular shift also, and this was probably within like a few weeks after it had happened. Um, I remember looking around at people again, and I was just kind of acknowledging everybody around me, and they started to just kind of like not feel real to me, and that immediately made me freak out. I was just, flipping out because I'm in a big warehouse. There's a lot of noises going off and stuff, and I'm seeing all these people, and they don't like feel real to me. I feel disconnected from them, and I even went as far as like I think it's called like solipsism or something like that. I don't know how to say it right off, but it's basically where you like some type of religion where you like basically view yourself almost as like God or something. Crazy stuff. But I ended up having kind of a experience with that this particular shift. I don't know why. I don't know why it came into my mind, but I just immediately thought that all these people around me and everything were all created like in my brain and I had made them. And and they're only alive and stuff because my conscience is like allowing them to. It made no sense and it was just terrifying. And that immediately just made me scared to death. And thank God there was only like 5-10 minutes left in that shift when this was happening because I was ready to just book it and leave. So I ended up starting my car right then and there and just went ahead and let it warm up. And as soon as it's time to go, I just completely ran out of there because I felt so panicked and just full of just straight up like terror. But I do remember um like I said, my symptoms didn't well some of the symptoms came on at certain times. It wasn't everything like coming all at once. So really at first it was mainly just the visual stuff and just kind of feeling that sense of just like that fight or flight mode. Kind of just you can't really zone in on anything. You just kind of there. That pretty much started right off the bat, really after all this stuff happened. But then as weeks went by, um, the feeling disconnected from everything around me started getting more and more and more and more uh, potent to me. So I immediately noticed being in my room, uh, I would look around at my wall and stuff and just kind of look around and it felt like the entire like dimensions and everything in my room had just been flipped or something. It just seemed like my room was smaller than usual or bigger than usual or just whatever. It didn't feel like my room. And this is the silliest thing, but my brother had gone to his girlfriend's for the weekend, and I started having this feeling with my room and stuff, and my room just feeling weird and just it didn't feel like my room. And I ended up actually getting out of my bed and going into my brother's room and staying in there because I was getting that feeling so strong, which sounds ridiculous, but in this time I didn't know what was going on. And I started thinking even at times that which I know you said the same thing, but almost like I had died that night with the edibles and stuff. And it's like I woke up after I woke up that next day, it's like I was in a different reality or a different dimension or whatever. And that thought kind of kept going to my head, and I was like, I knew it was like ridiculous to think, but at the same time, it felt so real that that could have been a possibility at this point, um, which was just crazy to me. But yeah. Anyways, weeks went by, and then probably about a month in, um, I had also been talking to my girlfriend at the time. We had literally like had just met. So we had just met like legit like a few weeks before this had all happened. So basically the first like couple months that we were talking was basically me going through, DPDR. So that was really frustrating. But I noticed about a month in that I started getting the symptoms of people not feeling real and just feeling like there was a wall in between me and people. And I would try to explain it to like my friends or my mom or like whatever. And they just wouldn't know what to say because they've never, gone through anything like that. And I was like, I just kept having to explain. I was like, you guys just like, I don't feel like I'm with you guys right now. It feels like you guys are like disconnected from me almost. And again, my surroundings were very off, and I completely noticed too. This had actually kind of helped my symptoms also at the time because I noticed it, which it made sense. But I noticed when I'd drive or I'd go out just in general outside, anything like that, or like in a public area when it's a lot more, busy and people around and all this stuff, my symptoms would get way progressively worse and they'd be a lot more stronger when I was in those situations. So that is one thing I did notice. Especially and then once I got back to my room, it would kind of subside a little bit. So that did tell me right off the bat that okay, like maybe there's something more to it. But at the time I couldn't fully see that because I still didn't understand exactly what I was going through yet. Um yeah, it was just a crazy time. I couldn't feel any type of emotion either for a little bit. Like even I felt so devastated for a while and just like stuck in my head that I even I mean there was times like where you almost like wanted to cry or something and I couldn't even like do that. I couldn't really like feel emotion. So as much as I wanted to, it's like I couldn't even grasp the feeling of doing that because my brain was just so shut off from reality. So I felt no emotions to anything. Um and even playing like video games and stuff because I'm a big like video game guy and music and all that stuff. Video games is always like one of the number one things to get my mind off stuff. It was just like I don't know. Once you start playing and get zoned in, you kind of feel like you're almost inside of it. So but I noticed at this time, even playing video games with my friends and everything, I still couldn't get my mind off these feelings and stuff, which I just thought was completely crazy. And it actually ended up getting so bad that I ended up quitting my job. So now I had been unemployed and I had these strong feelings of not feeling like I'm real, basically. Um, Oh, and the feeling of feeling like I couldn't tell between like a dream and reality also was a big thing because I'd wake up and I would kind of just be like, I don't know if I'm like really awake right now or if I'm dreaming. It was very strange. And I even remember a few times my sister would come and pick me up because she kind of knew what was going on. And I would just tell her in the car and stuff, I'm like, I feel like I'm in a dream right now. I don't even feel like I'm here. And she would just, look at me like, dude, what are you even saying right now? I'm like, I don't know. That's just how it was going with me. So
Yeah. Um, it's interesting that, when you mentioned about solipsism and these different interpretations of the symptoms, like solipsism or wondering if I died that night,
yeah.
or maybe I'm just asleep and I can't wake up. And I had all of those interpretations as well. And the it feels so frightening when you're going through it. But the reason that it's happening is simply because the feelings of disconnection that happen with DP and DR are perfectly normal, they're perfectly natural. But in a context where they are persisting longer than they need to be, they just feel really, really weird.
Yeah.
Like it's a deeply weird experience
Mm-hmm.
to feel disconnected, like overnight, feel disconnected from all your environment. Your bedroom doesn't feel like your bedroom. Your house doesn't feel like your house. People around you don't feel real.
Yeah.
And the reason it's happening is because your body and brain is trying to protect itself from a danger that isn't there.
Yeah.
At the same time, so you're going through this disconnection from yourself and the world around you. At the same time, your rational brain is perfectly fine, and your rational brain is trying to make sense of what's happening. So it's trying to find any sort of explanation for what's going on. So when you start to have thoughts like, well, what if I'm the only thing that's real and everything else is a figment of my imagination? Um, that thought feels like it makes as much sense as any other thought because nothing else does make sense. There is no one has given you an explanation.
Yeah.
So and then you think, well, Jesus, what if I died that night?
Yeah.
Um, I remember each one of those things, like, and am I still dreaming? And maybe I'm in a coma and I can't wake up. Um, all of these explanations felt like they made sense.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason for that was because I didn't have an explanation that did make sense. So combine that with the fact that your thoughts are racing with anxiety and jumping to catastrophic conclusions. And of course, you're going to be jumping to these horrible explanations like, oh, what if this is solipsism? What if I died that night? What if I'm still dreaming, etc., etc.? They become so overwhelming and so frightening that for me anyways, I don't know if you had this experience as well, Wylden, but like for me, when I actually got to an explanation that broke it down for me and said, this is actually just anxiety. This is all just anxiety. My first response was like, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. Like I felt anxiety before. Anxiety doesn't make me feel like I am dead.
Yeah.
Anxiety has never made me feel like I am in a dream and I can't wake up. That's not anxiety. So the explanation that was like, oh, what if you died? It feels like it makes more sense in terms of the scale of the explanation rather than someone just saying it's anxiety. It's because in your head, in my head, I was thinking like, it can't be that simple. There's no way this is just anxiety. And I would just dismiss that out of hand. But then as time goes by and you start to see, okay, but like the anxiety that you're using as your reference point is the anxiety that you feel when you are doing your exams, the anxiety that you feel when you are asking a girl out on a date, right?
Yeah.
This is different anxiety. This is fight or flight anxiety. This is the anxiety that you feel when the house is on fire or you're getting chased by a wild animal.
Yeah.
And the symptoms of that are the symptoms of DP and DR. And it can take a while to allow yourself to believe that and to understand it because you've been so invested in these nonsensical, massive explanations. But when you do, you start to take the power away from the anxiety, or you start to just let it go. And because those big explanations give anxiety power as well, because they feel like they're massive and there's big narratives, and part of recovery is just taking that away from anxiety and saying, no, I see you for what you are. It's just anxiety. These thoughts, this thought I've had about like, what if I'm the only thing that's real and this universe is a figment of my imagination.
Yeah.
That thought is the mental equivalent of muscle tension and sweating and heart palpitations. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But when you're going through it, it feels overwhelming and terrifying. But fortunately,
especially like if someone had came up to me right then and there and was like, believe it or not, like at the end of the day, all this is just anxiety, I would have told them, no way. No way is that true at all. But that's just how strong and how much it had taken over my life at this point. So
Yeah, certainly. Um, uh, Wylden, were you speaking to uh your parents or therapists or doctors or anybody like that at this point?
yeah, so again, I'd explained this a lot to my mom and stuff and my brother especially, because me and my brother are like very close. So he was like my number one person to talk about stuff with.
Mhm.
But I do remember actually we ended up going to like a psychiatrist or whatever. And really in that moment, um all I wanted at this point, to be honest, was just someone to hear about what I was going through before, and really just to talk to them like how I'm doing right now. But in reality, it was kind of just them, shoving like medications down my throat and stuff. And I immediately noticed that, and I knew that that wasn't really going to do anything and help. And I know some people it definitely can, and he can get people through some things. But I just knew personally for me that it really wasn't going to do anything. So I even remember telling my mom about it and stuff, and I was like, yeah, I really don't even see why I'm here, because I don't think it's really going to help at all. So yeah, in that moment, I kind of realized that all I really wanted or needed was just more of like a therapist, just to talk about it. But even more, because the biggest problem with it was the fact that I didn't know anybody else who had gone through this feeling, or currently going through this feeling. So I felt so alone, and I felt that I was legit going crazy, because I'm like, nobody else has even heard of this like me up until, because I didn't know what it was either up until I had it. I had never even really heard of it. So um yeah, that was one of the biggest, frustrating things, was realizing that I don't have anybody around who I can fully explain what I'm going through, because they haven't gone through it. And that was kind of the same thing with like the psychiatrist and stuff. I'd kind of tell them all my symptoms and stuff, but they didn't even really know like exactly what to say, because yeah, it was a crazy time.
What was your lowest point in the whole experience, Weldon? Is there a moment or time that sticks with you?
Yeah, I remember again, this was probably like the first month in, maybe just second, somewhere around there. Um, I remember because I'd spent a lot of time at my grandma's house, because my grandma's house was the place where like my mom usually was at, and my sister would all kind of stay over there a ton. So she was kind of like the get together house. So a lot of my family and everything was always there. So during this time, I'd go a lot over there, because it would, be nice to be around family and stuff. And my brother would usually be gone, and my best friend that lived with me would usually be working during the day. So I'd go over there. But I particularly remember um us eating all at the dinner table, and I had kind of gotten done early, because I was just kind of feeling it, um feeling out of it and stuff. So I kind of looked over at my mom, and she kind of she knew what was going on. So I ended up getting up, and my whole like family and stuff had been in the dining room. But I walked over to the kitchen and stuff, and set my plate down and all that. And I remember looking back over at my family, and it legit felt like the entire table I was looking at was just like, had like ghosts just like sitting on the table, like a super convincing feeling that they were all just kind of like these like ghost people, and that's like I didn't even know who they were almost. And that feeling was just the scariest thing that I'd ever witnessed, and especially going through the 6 months by far. And I'm sure other people had gone through kind of the similar thing of that, but kind of just seeing your family and feeling like they're not real to you almost was a very big uh pill to swallow because yeah, it was a crazy feeling.
Um, how did your recovery start? Well, can you remember when things started to change?
Yeah, so throughout the entire time I went through it, one of the things was like I couldn't definitely couldn't stop researching. So pretty I was probably on my phone every single day at this point, reading about it. I couldn't help myself. It's like um whether I was on break at work or just whatever before I'd quit, um I was constantly, reading, searching up stuff, all these things. I do remember also my ex-girlfriend at the time, well, not at the time, but this was like a few years back. This is probably back in like 2021. Uh I remember because she was a big like pretty big like smoker and stuff. She was in to weed a lot. Um I remember her explaining that she felt like she was kind of like watching a movie in real life and stuff. And I remember at that time I was like, "What do you mean?" And she would just kind of try to explain it and stuff, but she would just say it felt like she's kind of just watching a movie, like she's not really here and stuff. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? I was like, I haven't, gone through anything like that, so I don't know. But that had been a few years back from that current moment, and I remembered that it kind of just popped up in my head, and I was like, I remember her, talking about this, and not only was she talking about it, but she also, smokes weed a lot and stuff, and went through some things also. So that kind of clicked in my head as like maybe there's a bigger gap of what causes this because immediately what I thought was that, you know again with weed was that it just completely did damage to my brain, and there's no way that I can undo that damage basically. So I immediately just felt like, yeah, I'm stuck like this forever. But then I remember that moment and stuff. I was like, okay. I was like, that is, I don't talk to that person anymore, but I do remember that happening to somebody else that I knew to a certain extent. Wasn't as strong as, what I was going through. But I remember being on my phone every day, researching and researching and researching. Eventually, um, it's probably I think it might have been on YouTube, but I came across one of your videos, and I think it was like I can't remember which video. It was probably like your most popular video on your YouTube channel, but I came across that, and the way you explained it and everything made complete sense. I didn't want it to make sense, but it completely did. So I was like, maybe this really is anxiety this whole time. And then I ended up coming across your website and everything. And I read that you went through it for 2 years and everything. And um I was just completely invested because I was like, not a lot of people have explained it how you did, and especially make a whole website on it. So it was like, okay, like here's a little bit of hope, I hope. So I ended up reading your story and learning about it and everything. And then I came across the manual and stuff, and I was like, all right, well, next week I'm definitely gonna buy this manual and stuff because everything that you had already said in the videos prior had already like started to help, and they made complete sense again. So I ended up buying that, and the toughest part for me especially was um really just leaving my room and leaving my house and stuff because at the time uh at like the lowest point of these feelings that I had, um, I did not want to leave the house and leave my room and all that stuff, which I know is one of the worst things you can do with this condition. And I'd kind of just like bed rot all day pretty much. But I remember you especially specifically saying not to do that. And also with dieting and stuff, I'd kind of gotten lazy on my diet and everything because I didn't have the energy to cook stuff or just do anything like that. So I just order, fast food or eat junk food all day or just whatever. So um I had to cut that out. I even started like force myself to go to the gym and stuff, which was probably like one of the most terrifying experiences, to be honest, just because one, you have all these people around you, and two, like you're trying to be active again and do stuff. And especially when I'm in the gym, I like to like push myself, So that was kind of hard to do when I had those symptoms. But um I remember when you were talking about it and specifically saying that it is anxiety, and the only way to break out of it basically is so simple yet so hard, but literally just to stop thinking about it to a certain extent. That made complete sense to me because I was like, what have I been doing every single day since I've had this condition? I've been thinking about it 24/7. There's not one day where I haven't thought about it, and especially 24/7 throughout the entire, even in my sleep too, which I know for you also. I'd have nightmares. I would have I'd only sleep for like half the amount of time that I normally did because I've always been like a big like hibernator, so like sometimes I can sleep for like 10 hours straight. But during this time I really only slept for like on average probably about 4 or 5 hours every single night. So basically my sleep time was cut in half. But first thing in the morning, thinking about it, first thing when I'm about to go to bed, thinking about it, during the middle of the day, thinking about it 24/7. So I immediately, I was thinking about that and I was like, okay, I have to find a way to not think about it, which it sounds simple enough, but it's so hard when it's the one thing on your mind 24/7. So I continued to listen to your manual and all that, and I started I had headphones and stuff. I'd wear it, as soon as I'd wake up and just basically listen to it. Try to get out of the house, even though it was very difficult. That was probably one of the hardest things was that jump of basically trying to live a normal life again, but you still feel completely in the DPDR, those first couple of days when you're really trying to like go out and do stuff and just be away because basically that whole time of those feelings, the idea of me being out of the house for the entire day, especially by myself or something, was just immediately made me just panic because my safe place was basically just kind of like my room. So forced myself to do that, and it did take some time. It definitely wasn't immediate. It was very, very gradual, very what's the word? Um, it was super like it didn't happen immediately, and you kind of expect it to be all happy and sunshine and rainbows like right after you go through it, but in reality, it's so like you don't even really notice it happening. It just kind of disappears. So the consistency was like the biggest thing for me. It was consistently doing the stuff that you said in your manual. And eventually I got a job again, probably about like 4 months into it. And um that was very hard to do, but at the same time, I knew it was the right thing to do because again, it kept me out of the house and it kept me active, um, doing those type of things. So now that I had a consistent schedule and everything again, it kind of made life feeling a little more, real again, kind of like how it was before. And yeah, basically I stuck to doing those things every day, and over with time, it eventually got better. But there was also um moments where I would kind of have like days where it would kind of rise back up again, and then I had some days where it completely falls. So it was um very spiky every single day. So there was a lot of days where like one day out of the week or 2 days or whatever would be very, very, very bad. And it almost kind of feel like it was getting worse again because you start thinking about those feelings and the constant anxiety again. But really you kind of just had to push through it. So
Yeah, certainly. The it's something I talk about in the DP manual, but it's also very common with all anxiety-based conditions is that what to expect is not that like you're going to flick a switch and it's going to be gone in 24 hours. What to expect is that you're going to have ups and downs along the way. The anxiety is going to go up and down. But what we do in recovery is we train ourselves to let me rephrase that. The, the anxiety is going to go up and down, but over time the size of those waves reduces.
yeah,
So yeah, the ups and downs are still there, and initially they feel like setbacks. They feel like, well, I was doing great for 2 days and now it's back. Like, and it's like, well, no, it's not. It's not back. It's just that these are the normal ups and downs that happen when you're changing any habit of thought, you're changing any habit at all.
yeah,
Um, and you're so right when you say that, like, consistency is the key, because when you are consistent in your behavior and consistent in your focusing away from the thoughts of anxiety and DPDR when they're there, you're not like trying to switch them off in the moment because that inadvertently focuses your attention on them, but you
yeah,
simply let them be there. If they're not there, let them not be there. If they're there, let them be there, and consistently focus your attention away from them. That's what communicates to your brain that the anxiety is not relevant. It's not important. It doesn't need to be there anymore. But consistency is a core aspect of all forms of training, even down to gym,
yeah,
if you go in and like, you know, like do a serious like night of weights once a month, it's not going to do much for you and it's going to be really difficult. But if you're going like a couple of nights a week and you're just being consistent, pushing yourself a bit, like, that's how you see results. But it's training is the key word. You're training
yeah.
yourself out of one state and into another. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes discipline, but it works every time. And instead of seeing an overnight switch off of the symptoms or overnight a change of state, what you see are incremental improvements building up over time.
Yeah, I was gonna say what it was anti-climatic was the word I was trying to find, but very very anti-climatic. It was super gradual, and it's so gradual to where you almost like you pretty much really don't notice that it's gone at this point because you're because you got to think about it is before it happened, you were never thinking about it in the first place, and you were just kind of living life. So you have to find out literally just how to go back to that. So that's why you almost don't even notice that it it went away because eventually you get in that routine every day to where you're living life how you were before. So when it finally does go back to that, you finally think about it, especially after you've had time for your brain to finally like kick out of that um fight or flight state. And because people really like think a lot too when they're going through it is like, well, if you think about it now, well, the symptoms kick back on again and stuff. But in reality, it's just like once you've given your brain enough time to get out of that flight state, it basically stays out of it. So But it's just the hard thing is not having those thoughts and stuff, or not thinking about those thoughts for the, weeks on straight or months, at a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So
And also when you, as you said, when you give your brain the time and the space to focus away from it,
yeah,
what you're also doing is you're giving yourself a new perspective on the anxiety. So when you're going through anxiety, you're in that fight or flight state, anxiety itself feels insurmountable. It feels like you can never get out of this. You can't even imagine what it's like to not have anxiety. And I
yeah,
just think this is it for the rest of my life. I'm done. Um, but when you understand what it is and train yourself away from focusing on it, and the key word again is training. You're training yourself to do that. You change the perspective on it, and you understand it from a non-anxious point of view. And the non-anxious point of view on it is like, okay, it wasn't a pleasant thing to go through, but
yeah,
also it's completely harmless. Not only was this never going to hurt you, this is literally a defensive mechanism.
yeah,
It is literally there. It's trying to protect you. The reason it feels so strange and frustrating is because it's happening at a time when you're not in danger.
yeah.
If you went through all of these thoughts and feelings while the building was on fire, you wouldn't give the thoughts and feelings a second
You wouldn't
thought.
think that it
No,
wasn't normal. Yeah,
no,
yeah,
not for a minute. And you're so right as well, Wylden, in saying that like recovery is it's anticlimactic in the best possible way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like
100%.
because you're thinking like someone described it to me recently as like I thought it was going to be like a Hollywood ending.
Yeah,
You know, I thought it was going to be like I get out of this and it's just like there's like I'm up on the table at work and I'm going, yes, it's gone. Yes, like I
yeah.
finally get back to doing this. And I'm going partying, I'm traveling. And recovery is just like you just boringly get back to normal. Like
Exactly.
the way I like to think about it or I like to describe it is so statistically one in every three people will develop an anxiety-based condition like DPDR at some point in their lives. So
Yeah,
like agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, etc., etc. So one in three. So when you walk down the street in Atlanta or anywhere in the world, you're going to be walking past people who have had and who have recovered from anxiety-based conditions, right? They're
yeah,
going to be brushing past you, right? Those people are not walking down the street saying to themselves, oh my God, I'm so happy I don't have agoraphobia anymore. Oh yes, like life is so good now that agoraphobia is gone,
yeah,
right? No, they're just thinking like, I hope I get down to Walmart on time,
yeah.
because it's
Exactly.
closing soon, right? That's
I
what they're
like.
thinking about.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like to think about it also as life before. Like, I mean, life is great. No, don't get me wrong, but life before you weren't waking up every day and you were like, yes, like life. You know what I mean? But
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, because that's basically how you have to go about it. It's like you weren't celebrating every day, before, so you're not going to celebrate after. Because in reality, you're just going back to how it was before. You know what I mean? So
Right, right, yeah.
yeah,
And people and I had this worry too. People say, "But how will I recognize? How will I even know what normal is like if I get there?"
yeah,
But the answer to that is like, first of all, that's not your job, and second of all,
hmm
when you felt normal, you weren't walking around saying, "Yeah, this is normal." You
yeah,
know?
exactly.
2 seconds there. Yeah, yeah, this is normal. Do you know? Of
Yeah,
course not, because you've 100 things to do. You've got rent to pay. You've got to update your Netflix
yeah.
subscription. You've got to take the car to the mechanics.
Adult stuff.
Adult stuff. You're doing the
Yeah,
normal things that human beings do during the course of their day, and the last thing, it's like again, I just like to simplify this in terms of like these thoughts are the mental equivalent of heart palpitations and sweating and muscle tension.
mm,
That's what they are. These are symptoms of anxiety, and when you recover, you will look back on this in the same context as you would like muscle tension that you had for a couple of months. Like
yeah,
it's a thing that happened. It wasn't pleasant, okay, but it was never going to hurt you. It was not going to turn into anything worse, and now it's gone.
yeah,
So and when it's gone, you're not going to sing show tunes. You're not going to run around celebrating because it's just gone. And now you've got 100 other things to do because you're living your life as normal,
Yeah.
and not checking to see, am I living my life as normal, because
Mm,
you're too busy.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very very anticlimactic
Yeah.
in
Super.
in the best part. I remember when I recovered, I've said this on other interviews, like, but I remember saying to myself, Sean, if you ever get out of this, and I don't think you will, but if you ever do, you're going to go travel. You're going to go off to Thailand for 6 months and just
Yeah.
party. Like, that's what you're going to do. And when I recovered, I was just like, I should probably move out of my parents' house. Like,
Yeah.
I should probably reinsure my car because I hadn't been driving it. You just kind of like, but in the best possible way. It's just like these are the normal things that I do. Like, um, uh, how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery, Wylden?
It was great because it gave me a structure to follow. And not only that, but it let me know that somebody had gone through that condition before, and for let alone years on end. And it was just the best way to explain and also make sense, um, how the condition actually works. Because I mean, even with myself, again, with POTS and high anxiety, because I do have, I'm a very high anxiety person. I think a lot throughout the day, and I've been like that since like middle school. It makes complete sense when you were already going through these not these type of thoughts, but still high anxiety thoughts every single day. Because before DPDR and stuff, I still had, obsessive thoughts. Not that I didn't feel real or anything, but I still had those same thoughts with regular life stuff, with relationships or friends or just work, hobbies, all that stuff, which I feel is, pretty common with most people. But to anybody, I would really just say you have to stay consistent. And if you do buy the manual, you really need to do every single thing step by step, and that, because it's not going to work if you just do one or two things, and you have to stay consistent with it, and follow through with it. So
That's great. Well, then I'm so happy that the manual was helpful in your recovery. And so now that you have recovered, well then, so a question that people always ask me, and that I'm sure you've seen in the other recovery interviews, um, is getting back to normal really getting back to normal after depersonalization?
yeah, it definitely is. And when you go from having these feelings, and especially such strong feelings every single day, living 24/7 throughout the day, um, to it basically being gone. It really is just being just like how life was before. It kind of just subsides, and um, I think time is a very very big thing in it too. I think time is gonna help you just as much as the consistency, because again, it doesn't happen um overnight. And I mean, it's kind of just like same thing as if you get an injury, or break a bone, or whatever. It's not gonna heal overnight. You know what I mean? It takes time for these things to go back to normal, and eventually they do. It's the same thing with anything else. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's good to understand. I think a misconception that people have about recovery is that when you recover, that you'll like never feel stress again.
yeah, yeah,
That's
or almost like they're scared to. Because I even had moments too where after I had recovered, I was almost you know terrified to like stress or something, because I thought, if I stress really bad or whatever, what if this all you know comes back and things. And I have had some very like high stressful moments the last couple of even weeks really, but all normal. No no DPDR feelings with it and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the example I like to give is, take somebody who has a panic attack and they focus on, let's say, a different symptom, let's say heart palpitations.
Yeah.
So they become convinced that they're having a heart attack. They obsessively monitor their heart rate. They become scared to like exercise. They become terrified of anything increasing their heart rate because they think they're going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
That keeps setting off panic attacks. So then that person goes to the doctor and explains what's happening, and I keep thinking I'm having a heart attack and I'm going to die. And the doctor says, "You're not having a heart attack. You're perfectly healthy. Everything's fine. What you're experiencing are the heart palpitations as a result of anxiety and panic attacks." Okay, and that understanding and that context takes the power away from the anxiety, and the person can go about their life, right? Or they at least they're put on the path towards letting that go.
Yeah.
But does that mean that the person will never experience heart palpitations ever again? Like, of course they will.
No.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like everyone does. Everyone does. But in having that understanding, you prevent it from ever becoming this kind of feedback loop between panicking about your heart rate and anxiety, and that, spiraling off into a panic attack. It's
Yeah.
the understanding of it and that like these things, these symptoms of anxiety that we notice from time to time are perfectly natural and perfectly normal. Like, if you go through life without experiencing moments of DP and DR from time to time, you're in a minority. Like, these are
Yeah.
absolutely normal, natural things to experience from time to time. But in understanding what they are and why they happen, we prevent them from becoming a problem again, or an ongoing condition, and the same in the case of agoraphobia, claustrophobia, OCD, etc., etc. Yeah,
One thing I want to say too is you also saying you kind of want the you kind of want to be like friends with the anxiety rather than being afraid of it. And I thought that was a super like true thing because you would never want to think that way really because you're like, oh, anxiety, like I don't want anything to do with that. But in reality, that really is true. You kind of want to just embrace it. Um, because it takes a hold on you when you're so terrifying of those feelings and um feeling like you can't escape it because when you feel like that no matter what you're gonna have the symptoms of anxiety. It's kind of like a fear that doesn't have to be there, kind of like if if you were like had a phobia of air or something, there's no way you're gonna ever escape that. You kind of just have to accept it, what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely. The mistake that we make is that we think that we need to defeat anxiety.
yeah,
We think of it as like an enemy that has to be vanquished.
yeah,
But the problem with that, though, is that um, it's contextualizing it in an unhealthy way, because anxiety is not there to be defeated. If you're, again, going back to heart palpitations, for example, another symptom of anxiety, you wouldn't focus on your heart palpitations and say, I need to defeat my heart. I need to defeat this
yeah,
palpitation.
exactly.
And what would happen if you contextualize them like that is that you now think of them as something that needs to be defeated and attacked. So you keep focusing on them in an incorrect way, which causes your heart rate to keep going and your muscles to keep tensing up and the things of DPDR to keep going. So what we do instead with anxiety is and also, the core thing to remember, like anxiety, like it's not your enemy. It's literally trying to protect you.
Yeah,
It's literally trying to save your life. It's
yeah,
just doing it at the wrong time. It is the opposite of an enemy. So what we do in recovery is, instead of trying to defeat it, we change our perspective to it. We change our relationship to it. And we
yeah,
accept that this is actually, it doesn't feel like it when it's happening at the wrong time, but anxiety is actually your friend. and you change your relationship to it, and you stop trying to attack it, to defeat it, to negotiate with it, to be frustrated or pissed off with it. You just let it be, take your attention and focus elsewhere, and that's what gives your body and brain the permission to recontextualize it in the background.
Yeah.
Um, uh, well then, one more question for you. So there's going to be people watching this interview
Yeah.
who may be going through a very, very similar experience to what you went through, and what you went through is very, very common and increasingly so. What advice would you have for those people, speaking to them directly?
Um, Basically, like the things I said is just if you can buy the manual, because it's 100% worth it. And like I said, stay consistent with those steps. And I know there's times, because we've all been there, where you just feel like there's no hope, and kind of this and impeding doom of just you're never going to get out of it. And pretty much everybody who's recovered is gonna say, yeah, I had my point where I just felt like there was no way that I was gonna get out of it. There was no help, and I'm stuck like this. And me, even personally, um felt like that. And it's funny, because literally just a few months ago I was in the position of watching these interviews, going through this condition, saying it's over for me, I'm never gonna get through it. And now I'm on the channel telling people you will get through it. So um I think positive thoughts are a huge process of it. Thinking positively, and really just trying to go about your day. And I know it is very hard, because it was for me, especially me getting a double dose of that and the heart condition that didn't play well at all with me. So um yeah, I tell anybody, if you really want to get out of it, you definitely can, but you have to take what's necessary to do to get out of it. So wanted to say one more thing too, is I forgot to mention that I'm kind of almost like glad I also went through it too, because it gave me a very um I mean, it was definitely not fun going through, but now looking back on it, it opened up a lot of appreciation for things, also for people in life. And even this song that I made, basically is partly about it. So it created stuff for me. Um so really, I think anybody can get through it, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And what better way to process an experience like that, to than to funnel it into your creative work. I certainly did that with my film work when I recovered as well. But yeah, and for anybody watching this video as well, we will link to Wylden's music and that song in the video description. So go and check that out. And any socials you want to pass on as well, Wylden, and we'll add those in too. It's been so lovely to chat with you today, Wylden. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing your story with the channel. I know there's going to be people watching this who find your story super relatable and super inspirational. Yeah, keep in touch, and looking forward to hearing the song, and looking forward to finding out what you get up to next in your career, and keep up the good work. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, man.
Yeah. Take care, man. Bye bye.
Bye.